Alrighty, all 2C, section 5, triangle congruence. So in this one, we're talking about how can we know that two triangles are congruent? Um, there's the base way that we know that things are congruent if all their sides and all their angles are congruent. We know they're congruent. But here we're wanting some shortcuts, right? So we have three different shortcuts that we can use for triangles. We have side, 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 listed as SSS, side, angle, side, as side SAS, and angle, side, angle, ASA. So what we're going to be looking for on these triangles here is, for starters, SSS. Are all three sides of both triangles congruent? And if they are, we don't have to know anything about the angles. Just knowing that their sides are congruent, we know that they are congruent. Next up, we have SAS. If two triangles have two congruent sides and the angle between them is congruent, then we know that the whole triangle is congruent. Lastly, angle, side, angle. If we have two angles and the side between them that's congruent, then we know the two triangles are congruent. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to say yes or no, are they congruent? And then we're going to say, how do we know they're congruent? And that's always going to be SSS, SAS, or ASA. All right, let's start off number 2. Well, here we have an angle and another angle. We know those are congruent. We don't know anything about the other two angles that are listed. So because we only know one of the angles, it could be SSS or SAS still. Right, those are the only two with one A in them. None of the sides are marked, but we know that this side here is actually shared between them. So it's congruent to itself, right? But still, we don't know anything about any of the other sides. So we know something about one of these sides and one of the angles. So we're just going to be able to say not congruent to this. We don't know enough to be able to say this is congruent. Let's look at number 3. Here we know that this side is congruent to this side. This side is congruent to this side. And then we have the third side in the middle that's congruent to itself. Well, we have side, side, and side. So this is going to be congruent by side, side, side. Number 4. This one's going to work a whole lot like number 3. We have a side and the other side that's congruent. We have this side and this side congruent. And lastly, we have this side and that side congruent. We have 3 sides. They're all congruent. So this is congruent by side, side, side. Number 5. We know that the double swoop angles are congruent. We know that the single swoop angles are congruent. We know that this side in the middle is congruent to itself, right? Because they share it. So we have 2 angles and a side. Up here, what do we have? 2 angles and a side. That one might be angle, side, angle, but it needs to be the angle, the side, and then the other angle. Well, let's look down here again. Here's our side. The 2 angles that touch it is this angle and this angle. We don't know anything about that bottom angle yet. So we can't say they're congruent yet. But what we can do is say, well, if the 2 angles are congruent, then the third angle has to be congruent also, right? Think about it as like, I don't know, you've got 2 triangles. Maybe it's easier if we write it out to the side. We know that this is, I don't know, we'll say this is 50, 50, this is 90, they're both 90. Well, these last ones here have to be the same thing. And I think they'd be, what would they be? They'd be 40. They'd both have to be 40, right? Same idea in number 5. The third angle, because the other 2 are congruent, the third one has to be congruent. So I could put a triple swoop through there. And from there, now I have the yellow angles up here, the blue side, and the yellow angles down there. So I know that it's congruent by angle, side, angle. Number 6. Well, here we have, let's start off looking at the spot where they cross in the middle. We remember vertical angles from, I think that was unit 2A, I think. We know that this is congruent to that, right, by vertical angles. We know that this side and this side are congruent. We know that this angle and this angle are congruent. We have 2 of the angles listed, so we could also mark in the third one, right? Just like what we did in number 5. So I could mark in, well, this one has to be congruent also. Now let's look. We have one side, and we have all 3 angles. So just like in number 5, we're going to be able to say angle, side, angle. So this is going to be congruent by angle, side angle. Number 7. This side in the middle here is congruent to itself. And then if we look, we have the angles are also congruent. So this is another case of it is congruent by angle, side, angle. I didn't mean for all those to fall in that category, but I think they look kind of cool, neat graphs there. Let's look at number 8. Oh my, we've got another set of angles, then the sides, then the angles again. So again, this is congruent by angle, side, angle. Well, good grief. This one's also going to be angle, side, angle. Here we have the angles. Here are my 90-degree angles, my sides in between them, and my other angles. This is also going to be congruent by angle, side, angle. All right, hopefully these last ones will be different. And they are. Good, 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 good. So here, well, maybe this one won't be as different as I hoped. Here's my 90-degree angle. That means this one's also 90-degree angles by vertical angles. Now, if we look at our triangles, we have 2 of the angles that are marked as congruent. So we can mark the third one as congruent also. Now we have an angle, a side, and an angle. An angle, a side, and an angle. So again, we have congruent by angle, side, angle. And we have another angle, side, angle. Good grief. These vertical angles in the middle are congruent. So we have an angle. Let me just highlight. Angle, a side, and an angle. An angle, side, and an angle. So this is also going to be congruent by angle, side, angle. All right, let me look and see. We did a bunch of angle, side, angles. We had some side, side, sides. And what was the last one? Side, angle, side. So what would that be? Let me just show you what a picture of that would be like, the side, angle, sides. So if we had, if these were our 2 triangles, we had this angle marked here. Then we had maybe that this guy and that guy are congruent. This one and that one are congruent. We see that the blue ones are congruent. This one and this one's congruent. The orange angle in the middle of it's congruent. And then the green sides are congruent. This falls into the side, angle, side. So these would be congruent by side, angle, side. All right. Whenever you start looking at your homework, start off by counting how many sets of congruent things there are. At least that's kind of how I like to think of it. I like to say, well, how many angles are there that are congruent? If there's one angle that's marked as congruent, it's probably not going to be side, 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 right? because that would just be extra information. It probably won't be listed. So if you see an angle listed, you're probably going to look at side angle side or angle side angle. If you see two angles listed, you're probably going to be looking at angle side angle. So look at these, I think these pictures here help a bit to show what are we looking for. We're looking for them in that order. The other trick that they're going to have on some of these is the one that we kind of showed a lot, but the vertical angles here, where two things intersect, and the opposite, the vertical angles there are congruent, right? You're going to need to use that some in the homework. And lastly, what you're going to need to use is what we used in some of, what did we use that in? Like in number 5, whenever we were able to mark the third angle congruent, make sure you're able to do that. If you're still confused, go on YouTube, search triangle congruence, and there will be a ton of videos about them. All right, good luck.